Today I'm excited to be unboxing the brand new Google Pixel 10 as well as the Google Pixel 10 Pro. Now in today's video I'll be going over what is new with each phones, both the upgrades as well as some downgrades, which I will talk about. I'll also be setting up both phones to get them up and running so I can show you how the two compare, see the differences and similarities between the 10 and the 10 Pro. And as always, I will leave the purchase links down in the description. Let's get started. Okay, let's dive in. I'd say let's start with the Pixel 10. Here we go. So the Pixel 10 will come in at a price of $799, where the 10 Pro comes in at $999. So starting here with the 10, we got the two familiar Pixel pull tabs on the back. That's what I'm going to call them. And then we slide it up. There we go, like so. And here we have the box underneath. Now, both phones do start with 128 gigabytes. I do wish that the Pro in particular started with 256 gigabytes, especially given that higher price point, but still 128 gigabytes, especially for the regular 10, is a place to start. Again, I would like that to see increased in the future. But anyway, let's take a look here at the Pixel 10. So I decided to go for the color in frost, and let's see how this looks. So let's go ahead and unwrap this here. There we go, a bit of a rough peel compared to other phones, and here it is. Ooh, okay, quite nice. So I gotta say, first impressions, it's a little bit more lavendery than I imagined. So there's a little bit of a purple undertone to it. So it's a light blue, baby blue with some purple hues underneath. I think it's quite a nice color, quite soft, very summery, and I think that will look quite nice. The frame itself is going to be a bit more on the bluer side, a bit of a silver blue, a bit cooler toned compared to the glass on the back. But both cases here, I think, are really nice colors. And again, we get that shiny glass back here on the back with that matte aluminum frame going around the phone. All right, so also in the box, we have the USB-C to USB-C cable, very familiar. I think similar than what we've seen with previous Pixel phones. I will say though, I generally do like Pixel cables. I think they are good quality. They're quite thick as well. Not braided, but they do tend to last. So that is of course very important. And then over here, we have your manual. Let's see the documentation. We got a very, very thick book here of your, I guess, warranty information in pretty much every language that exists. So that is that. I think quite a lot of paper considering from an environmental perspective. And then here on the back, lastly, we have your SIM ejector tool. Now, I did buy mine here in London, as that is where I'm based. And here we do still have a physical SIM card. So let's go ahead and take a look at the phone. Now, let me go ahead and boot up the phone here. Some of the big features coming specifically to the Pixel 10 compared to the previous Pixel 9 is that for the first time, we now have a telephoto lens on a non-Pro Pixel phone. This, I think, is really cool. And this is a big upgrade, but this does also bring some downgrades to the camera, but we'll talk more about that in a sec. Now, powering the Pixel 10 is Google's Tensor G5 chip, so it'll be interesting to see how that compares, especially to the competition, like, for example, the very similarly priced Galaxy S25 with, of course, its Exynos processor as well. So it'll be very interesting to see how the two compare. And of course, this being a Google phone, or really any new phone these years, is we get a lot of AI features too, which I'll be touching on as we go as well. So let's bring this phone to life. And then in the meantime, while we wait for things to load, let's check out the 10 Pro. All right, let's move the Pixel 10 here off to the side and check out the 10 Pro. Now, I got it in the really cool moonstone color. I think this is going to be a really nice color, at least based on what I see here on the box, as well as in their press material. Nice, understated and chic, but let's see what it looks like. So we get a very similar unboxing experience. In fact, the size of the two boxes, I would say, is pretty much identical. So here we go. Let's lift up the box. And voila, here it is, the Pixel 10 Pro. Now, I'm really excited to check this phone out because this is actually the first time that I've got a Pro model Pixel phone. I've reviewed the Pixel 9, 8, and also the A series, but I've never looked at a Pro model from the Pixel line. So here we go, 3, 2, 1. There we go, smooth and fast. And look at that. So here is that beautiful moonstone color, and I really like it. Now, if you've been watching my channel for a long time, you will know that I like colors that are understated, but still a little bit unique, a little bit different compared to, say, the traditional white, black, gray. And that is exactly what this is. It's got these dark blue undertones. If I angle it in and out of the light, you can see it kind of shift And on the frame here, we have this beautiful polished stainless steel frame, which definitely gives the phone more of a premium feel. This does really remind me of the iPhone 14 Pro series, which also had very similar flat frame like this. And there is something special about this, I think, touch of polish. It really creates more of a premium feel compared to the matte feel and look that you get here on the regular Pixel. But taking a closer look, you'll see that the color on the frame is going to be a little bit darker compared to that of the back. We get a nice matte frosted back finish, which gives a really nice textured, soft feel in the hand. I think that's nicer to grip as well, and does a pretty good job, from seeing it so far, at hiding fingerprints, which is impressive considering this is a darker color. Normally darker color phones definitely show more fingerprints. Right, and then as for the rest of the box, I think it's a very similar story. We got the same USB-C cable, and then over here we've got your same book of literature, and then here we have that SIM ejector tool as well. So the unboxing experience is going to be very simple, but let's be honest, we are here for the phone itself. So let's boot it up and talk you through some of the key features, specifically here on the 10 Pro. So one feature I did gloss over on the Pixel 10 is that we now get Pixel Snap, which is essentially Google's version of MagSafe. And the cool thing is this feature does come to both phones. So over here, I've got a couple of MagSafe accessories, quite literally from Apple. So I've got a MagSafe charger here, and then I have this really cool tripod stand from Moft. You guys probably recognize that brand from previous videos. I really enjoy using their products, but these are both MagSafe accessories, so they're made for iPhone, but they should work perfectly on the Pixel phones now too. All right, let's do a little test here. So I've got the MagSafe charger plugged into my battery pack, and in theory, this should charge the Pixel 10. So let's take a look here. If I attach this, right like so, there we go. As you can see, we are charging. So this MagSafe charger will not only connect to the new Pixel line, but also actually charge the phone through wireless charging. Now, I'll talk more about battery and charging in a sec, go over that in more detail and how the phones compare to last year and also to each other. But I do quickly want to demo this Pixel Snap feature. I think it's really cool to finally have this functionality on a large Android phone like this. I was really disappointed to see that Samsung, unfortunately, didn't add magnets to their Galaxy S25 line, and it's really cool to see Pixel, or Google rather, get ahead of that and finally also include magnets on an Android phone. I think it's great for not just charging, because, you know, for wireless charging, you can just place your phone to charge without having to perfectly align it, and it unlocks functionality through these really cool accessories like wallets, like stands. So check this one out, for example. You can just plop your phone up like that, and there you go. You have a built-in tripod, great for, you know, planning your phone at your desk while you're working. Then here on the back, you can also store cards. So really great accessory. And this here really opens up a huge catalog of accessories, not just first-party accessories for the Pixel line specifically, but also, of course, the hundreds, if not thousands of MagSafe accessories that you will find for the iPhone that are now also compatible on the Pixel. Now, one thing that I do want to see as well is whether the magnetic strength is different compared to the iPhone. So here I have a 16 Pro Max, and just based on my impressions here, let's see, I'd say it feels about the same. Now, I do believe that with Pixel first-party accessories, so the ones from Google, the magnets will be a little bit stronger, but for the ones that are third-party, like this stand here, it appears to be about the same as what you'd expect on an iPhone, which is to say, strong enough for most use cases. All right, so going back to the Pixel 10 Pro specifically now, one of the big features I'm really curious to test is going to be that new 100x ProRes zoom. Now, this is going to use AI to enhance that 100x zoom, which normally, let's be honest, isn't exactly useful, perhaps only to say read a sign in the far distance or something. But with this AI upscaling, it's meant to make those pictures look good and be very usable. So that's something I'm very keen to test. But we'll set up these phones and quickly boot up the cameras once I've transferred the data. But let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had a Google Pixel phone, or are you just upgrading to the Pixel 10 or 10 Pro, or are you considering getting your first? And if you are enjoying this video so far, a like and a sub to the channel would be amazing. Okay, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna transfer my data over, get these phones set up, and then we can take a closer look. And we're back. So I've now transferred all the data, both to the Pixel 10 here on the left, as well as to the 10 Pro here on the right. And as you can see, we are ready for business. Still downloading a few apps in the background, but both phones are set up. So we can now take a closer look, see how they compare, as well as talk about the biggest features coming to both phones. Now, to start, I want to do a little more in-depth comparison to the designs here of both phones. As you can see, they look, well, very similar. We get this iconic horizontal Google Pixel visor camera setup on the back, and especially now that the Pixel 10 has 3 lenses, they look even more similar than before. They also do stick out a fair ton, I would say, or fair amount rather. Both of them do equally so, but because the camera visor stretches all the way across the phone, I don't really find it to be as big a problem, because when the phone is on a surface, you don't get a wobble like you do with pretty much every other phone in this size category. Now, from a design perspective, the biggest differences are going to be in the materials as well as the feel in the hand. So again, we get that glossy finish on the Pixel 10, which as you can see is already picking up quite some fingerprints, though this lighter color does hide it reasonably well, but not as well as, of course, the matte finish that we get on the 10 Pro, where you pretty much don't see them. And again, I really like this moonstone color. I think it looks great. Now, looking over at the frame of the phone, you'll see that we have the glossy finish here on the Pixel 10 Pro. Now, this of course will show fingerprints more clearly, but is made of stainless steel compared to aluminum on the Pixel 10, so this should hold up better over time. It is more durable and should withstand drops better as well, and definitely gives the phone a more premium look and also feel in the hand. I would say the 10 Pro is a little bit heavier, not that much heavier, but a little bit heavier than the regular 10, and you do feel this in the hand, and it just does feel more premium. There's just something about it, even the clickiness of the buttons. This just feels a bit more hollow on the 10, whereas on the Pro, the 10 Pro, it just feels a bit more solid. All right, so I want to do a brief speaker test and comparison between the 10 and the 10 Pro to see which is better. So let's go ahead and pull up the 10 here first. I've got the same video playing on both. Let's turn up to max volume and let's have a listen. Today, I want to share my experience after using the brand new Samsung Galaxy Z Flip 7 for the past month. Okay, that is 1, and then over to the Pro, turn it up to max. There we go. Today, I want to share my experience after using the brand new Samsung Galaxy Z Flip 7 for the past month. Okay. Z Flip 7. All right, so hopefully that picked up over my microphone, but what I can say is there's definitely quite a substantial difference in the audio quality between the two. The Pixel 10 sounds a little bit more hollow, a little bit more tinny, where on the Pixel 10 Pro, the sound is richer, it is more full. You get a little bit more depth. You can hear it in my voice. There's more low end, as well as the higher end on the crisper side is more detailed compared to that of the 10. So really quick side by side here. Z Flip 7 resolves many of the concerns from previous flip phones with it. Resolves many of the concerns from previous flip phones with its much better. So I hope that carries over. Unfortunately, I can't play any music because that will result in a copyright strike, so I can only play my own voice. But believe me, there is quite a big difference between the speakers. Now, that is not to say that the Pixel 10 was bad. I think it mostly suffers in the quality and depth of the sound, but not necessarily the volume. I'd say the volume is quite comparable, so it definitely does get plenty loud even on the 10. And now let's take a closer look at the display. So the display is going to be brighter on both phones. So the Pixel 10 is meant to go all the way up to 3000 nits, as you can see here with maximum brightness. It is definitely blinding my camera here. And the Pixel 10 Pro should be even brighter at up to 3300 nits of brightness. And having the two here side by side, let's pull up an app here. And here we go. I've now got both phones running at max brightness. And well, as you can see, they're both super bright. So this is significantly brighter than, for example, the Galaxy S25 or iPhone 16. So it's really great to see 3000 nits of brightness on the non-Pro Pixel 10 and then 3300 nits on the 10 Pro. So really interested to see how these will compare, especially outdoors, as this is really where this feature is going to shine. Indoors, it may blind you like it is blinding my overhead camera. Now, one issue that has plagued many of the previous Pixel phones is color shift. Now, all displays have this to some extent, where when you angle the display from left to right, the colors can sort of change. But I found on previous Pixel phones this to be more prominent than on others. So I want to do a very quick informal test here, just looking at the phone, tilting the display from left to right to look for any kind of changes in the color. So often you'll see blue or greenish hues. And looking at the 10 here, this looks pretty good. I don't really see much color shift at all. Let's take a look at the 10 Pro. Do the same thing here. Even better. I would say the 10 Pro fares even better, where it's basically not visible at all in the 10 Pro. I could compare this to, for example, the iPhone, which has a very excellent display in this regard as well. Then over on the 10, I would say I see it a little bit, but not as much as, say, on some previous Pixel phones, like, for example, the Pixel 8, which I know definitely had this a lot more, even some of the A series as well phones. But other than that, I would say this is pretty great. I would say it's not an issue at all, even on the Pixel 10. So that is good to see that both on the 10 as well as the 10 Pro, color shift is not really an issue. And now let's talk about the camera, starting off here with the Pixel 10, as it's kind of an interesting story where there's upgrades but also some downgrades. So first of all, the biggest upgrade is that, like I said, we now have 3 lenses, including that 5x telephoto, and this I think is a wonderful addition. I'm especially happy that Google decided to add a 5x telephoto, not a 3x telephoto like we get on the S25. The reason for that is the 3x telephoto is going to be very similar to the 2x crop that we get on the main sensor, so having a 5x telephoto is a much bigger range of zoom that I think makes it a lot more useful and a better lens to have. So great to see this lens on what is essentially a non-pro phone, and this really is new in this space. I really welcome this addition. This, by the way, is going to be a 10.8 megapixel lens. However, here are their downgrades. So I think for Google to make room, both in terms of the budget as well as maybe physically even within this camera module, the other lenses, the main lens and the ultra-wide lens, have taken a slight hit. So to put this into context, the main lens now goes from a 50 megapixel sensor that we got on the previous Pixel 9 to a 48 megapixel sensor. And I think more importantly, the sensor is going to be slightly smaller too, which means it's going to be letting in less light, and this may affect things like your dynamic range as well as performance in low light. In fact, just before shooting this video, I took a look at the specs online and found that the specifications of the main lens on the Pixel 9 is now the same as on the main lens of the budget/mid-range Pixel 9a. So, of course, specs aren't everything, especially when it comes to camera, but when there's a year-over-year downgrade, it's just not really something you expect, and it's something I'm definitely going to test very thoroughly to make sure that this camera is up to par. Now, the ultra-wide lens too is another area where unfortunately we did see a downgrade, where the megapixel count went all the way down from 48 megapixels to 13 megapixels. Now, this is a pretty significant drop that may very likely affect things like your sharpness, particularly on ultra-wide lenses. Around the edges, you can get artifacting and image distortion, and I think that will be more likely when you have a smaller sensor like this. Now, of course, I haven't thoroughly tested these cameras, so I'm not going to draw any conclusions, but I do want to make you aware of the specifications, particularly the downgrades, as these are the things, of course, that you're not going to hear advertised, and I do think are important for you to know if you're considering buying this phone. And then switching over to the Pixel 10 Pro, there really isn't much to say, as the camera hardware is pretty much identical compared to last year's 9 Pro. The only difference is that we now do get better image stabilization, which of course I will be testing too. Okay, so to give you an idea of what these cameras are like, I'm going to go ahead and pull them up here on both phones, and we're going to do a very brief little impromptu test here, starting with, of course, a selfie. So let me grab a selfie here. Great, and then over on the 10 as well. Okay, so right away, I can definitely see quite a big difference in the color reproduction, where first of all, on the 10 Pro, this does appear to be an HDR photo and not on the regular 10. And this may be a setting. Both phones have been set up from factory, so I haven't changed any of the settings, but we do definitely see a difference in the color output as well. I would say my skin looks more natural here over on the 10 Pro compared to the 10. Let's take a look at some details here. If we zoom into my hair, yeah, again, you can see it more accurately, more effectively distinguishes the individual hairs on my head here on the 10 Pro compared to the 10. So we got a little bit more detail as well. In terms of the depth of field, so if I zoom into here, my background here, we look at this closet behind me, you'll see there's a little bit more bokeh over on the Pixel 10 Pro compared to the 10, so we get a little bit more depth. Now, this isn't very far behind me, but it still gives you some idea of what that is like. And then zooming down here, over to my shirt, let's look at the detail in, for example, the buttons here. Yeah, again, it's a similar story where on the 10 Pro, we definitely get more detail. We get larger sensors, again, higher megapixel counts too. But I will say the 10 still looks really good, especially considering that this here is just the selfie camera. And I'm going to take a picture of a subject here. So here I've got the S25. Let's do the same on the 10 Pro. All right, so let's compare these two side by side as well. Let's zoom in over onto the camera module and look for detail. So both have really good detail. I can see little specks of dust here showing up on both cameras. The color overall of the phone is a little bit different, but the lighting in this room is difficult, especially with these studio lights. There's a lot of dark and then really bright spots. So this is in that sense a great way to test the capability of phone cameras. But as you can see, they both do a pretty great job, I think, in terms of setting the white balance. If I look at the white portion here of my table, table, both are going to be quite accurate. The image is perhaps a little bit warmer on the 10 Pro and a little bit lighter, cooler rather, on the regular 10. And let's take a look at the depth of field. So here we do see a pretty big difference where you can see there's a lot more blur in the background of the 10 Pro compared to that of the regular 10. And this is likely due to the larger sensor that we have on the 10 Pro, allowing for more depth. And it does give you that nice shallow depth of field, more of a DSLR look and feel compared to the 10. But again, as you can see, the 10 still performs really well. It does an excellent job with focus, staying sharp on the phone, and then still a nice blurry background in the back. And just a couple more tests here. Let's take a look at a telephoto camera sample. So this is using the 5x mode on both phones. And here we go. So there's a picture of my tripod. So if I go ahead and zoom in here to the Sony logo, you can see a pretty stark difference with the two side by side, where on the Pixel 10, it's a little bit more blurry. The text is a bit softer, where on the 10 Pro, you get really sharp lines going around each letter. The details as well are more well distincted and easier to pick up, including the lines here of the plastic mold on the tripod. Again, looks more clean and more true to life, I would say, over on the 10 Pro, where on the 10 it does look a bit more processed. I also noticed that the image in general, and that's also with previous examples, tends to be a little bit brighter on the regular 10 compared to the 10 Pro. And I think in this case, looking at the tripod, the 10 Pro gives a more true to life depiction here of my surroundings. But I will say both examples here are really strong. And again, particularly on the 10, because of that pretty big price difference, having this 5x telephoto lens is really great. And as you can see, it's a very serviceable lens that I think is going to result in some really creative photos and some great use cases. And then lastly, I want to show you a quick macro shot here as well. So basically what I did was, using the main lens, I got as close to the subject as I could before taking the photo. And well, as you can see, the difference here is pretty stark. So I got, first of all, a lot closer here on the 10 Pro than on the 10. And then if we zoom in, you'll see the individual fibers of the packaging are much more distinct and clear on the 10 Pro versus the 10. I can even zoom in further here on the 10 Pro. So this just gives you an example again of how they compare in macro photography. But all of that's to say that once again, I think the regular 10 performs really well in this area too. And I think my biggest concern when it comes to the camera is going to be on the 10, where we do have the downgrades in the megapixel count and sensor size on that main and ultra wide lens. I'll be very interested to see how this phone holds up outside of the studio in the real world, of course, which I will be doing for my full review. So be sure to subscribe to not miss that. Now, there is one camera feature that is specific to the 10 Pro that I'd love to test and quickly take a look at, and that is going to be the brand new ProRes zoom. Now, this is going to essentially enable what Google says are useful 100x zoom photos. So, of course, I'm in the studio, so I don't have a lot that's really far away, but what I'm going to do is go back to the same tripod that we were looking at earlier, and let's zoom in all the way to 100x. As you can see, we're at 100x here, and take a look at the S of the word Sony for hopefully an S tier photo. So I'm going to stabilize it as best I can, take the photo, and let's take a look and see the results. So I'm going to open up the picture here, and oh, there it is. Look at that, processing ProRes zoom. So as you can see, it is then going to be changing the picture, and you know what? That's not, oh, here we go. We can look at both the before, and then that's the after. Okay, so that definitely does look a lot better. So it does remove a lot of the noise. So here we go. If you look at the original, you can see there's a lot of noise around the S. The S is a bit more blurry as well. And then here it is really sharp. I think some of the detail in the S itself is lost, but overall, this does a surprisingly good job. And this, I think, is a terrible example. Let's not forget, I'm in the studio here. This is more meant for outdoor, you know, in the nature. But just quickly within the studio, I already see, first of all, a massive difference between the before and after. I also like that you do get both photos. That way you can see before and after, and I guess choose which one it is you want to keep. But in this case, I definitely choose the ProRes version, as this definitely looks really clean, especially considering this is 100x. And now let's talk about the battery. So both phones do get bigger batteries. So the Pixel 10 is going to be 4,970 milliamp hours, where the 10 Pro is 4,870 milliamp hours. So a little bit smaller on the Pro than on the 10, but both are going to be close to that roughly 5,000 milliamp hour mark, which is a great place to be, especially for phones this size. So I do expect that the battery life should be pretty good on both phones. So I'm very curious to test that. And then, as we looked at earlier, we also get Qi 2 wireless charging with, of course, magnets, which is finally, really great to see here on more Android phones to attach your MagSafe charger or your Pixel Snap charger, and then accessories like your wallets and stands as well. So this, I think, is going to be really great, and I'm super happy that Google has added this to both Pixel phones, not just on the Pro. Now, in terms of charging, both phones can charge wirelessly at up to 15 watts. So only the 10 Pro XL, the larger phone, can charge at up to 25 watts. So 15 watts, I would say, is pretty much average, not necessarily super fast, but also not slow either. Now, if you do want to charge faster, you can charge wired at up to 30 watts, which is a little bit faster compared to last year, which was 27 watts. Now, Google is never really known for their flagship performance. Now, their performance hasn't been bad by any means, but when you do compare it to Samsung Galaxy phones or Apple's iPhone phones, the performance on Pixel phones has been lower by quite a large margin. Now, so far, my experience with the Pixel 10s has been really good. Both phones appear to be smooth and running fast, but the question is, how will that hold up over time, 3, 4, 5 years down the line? Now, the Tensor G5 chip that is going to be shared both in the Pixel 10 as well as the 10 Pro is going to be a 3nm chip, and this is great as its architecture does typically offer better efficiency, so should mean hopefully better battery life. And again, the batteries in these phones are quite large, so that is good to see. And Google also promised up to 34% better performance compared to last year's G4 chip. Now, we'll have to see how the 10 and 10 Pro perform both in benchmarks, but of course, most importantly, in just day-to-day use compared to that Galaxy as well as iPhones to see how that new G5 chip stacks up. But again, based on the performance that I've seen in previous Pixel phones and the data that Google has provided for the new G5 chip, I still think there'll be quite a margin between the Pixel phones as well as the Galaxy and iPhones as well. These being Google phones, we also get a slew of new AI features, and some of the big ones that I'm really excited to test. First of all, is going to be Magic Queue, and this is meant to use AI to help pop up relevant information when it is needed. So for example, let's say you're having a message, you're messaging with someone and you're talking about an upcoming flight. It should then detect that and then prompt you to quickly see your flight details, for example, like an estimated arrival or say your flight number. So that should be really good. This is something I can't really show you today because I think I really need to start using these phones, getting my data in there before I can showcase these features, but again, I'll show that in my full review. Now, what I can show you is the brand new Google Pixel Journal app. Now, this is going to be very similar to the Journal app that we got on iPhone, and here, as you can see, it is running on the Pixel 10 as well as the 10 Pro, and this is going to allow you to add in your journal entries. Really cool to see. I think if you do use an application like this on your iPhone, it will make it easier to potentially switch to a Pixel, as you have a very similar experience on this phone as well. Now, last thing I do want to mention is that both the Pixel 10 as well as the 10 Pro will also get up to 7 years of software support, which has kind of become the industry standard. Samsung offering this, Apple pretty much offering this as well, but it is still great to see, as that does mean that these phones will get support for many years to come. So there you have it. Those are my initial thoughts on the Pixel 10 and Pixel 10 Pro, sharing my initial impressions after unboxing the phones and briefly having used them once they are set up. And as you can see, there really is many small upgrades that we get both with the 10 as well as the 10 Pro. We get some cool new Google features, particularly in AI, which I'm really excited to check out. Some big camera upgrades, particularly with that ProRes zoom and the new telephoto lens on the 10. But again, also some downgrades to the main and ultra-wide lens. And I'm really interested to see how this will compare to last year's Pixel, to see how much of a downgrade this really is, and see if overall the camera quality on the 10 in particular will stack up and outperform, or at least be on par with the S25 and of course the iPhone 16. And it'll be interesting to see how these two phones compare as well, to see whether the price difference is worth it to jump over to the 10 Pro, or whether the 10 is going to be a better value buy. I'm going to be answering all of these questions and more in my individual reviews for the 10 and the 10 Pro, so be sure to subscribe to not miss that. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.